All right, let's dive right into this explainer, and honestly, we're going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about the ground beneath your feet. Right now, if you're sitting in Florida, you naturally assume you're firmly attached to the North American continent, right? Well, if we rewind the clock back 500 million years, the rock that actually makes up modern-day Florida was the separate silver shard of crust just barreling across the ocean toward what is now the Sahara Desert. It turns out your country simply wasn't where you think it was. Over the course of this explainer, we're going to find out exactly where your hometown was hiding.
So to answer that, you kind of have to do something radical. You have to strip away every border, every coastline, and literally every map you've ever memorized. To truly understand our planet's history, we've got to erase the modern world completely. Because back in the Cambrian period, 500 million years ago, Earth was essentially an alien planet. We're going back to a time way before any familiar geographical landmarks even existed, just to trace the incredible journey of the very ground we stand on.
Because look, if you stood on land back then, actually scratch that, you wouldn't even recognize the place. No trees, no grass, zero birds. The sky above you would be this weird pale violet color, mainly because atmospheric oxygen sat at a meager 13% compared to our modern 21%. You'd probably be gasping for air. The highest structure on land was literally a 2-inch tall fungus, that's it. All the real estate action was happening beneath the waves. Life was entirely underwater, and the apex predator running the show was this intimidating 3-foot-long, shrimp-like monster called Anomalocaris. But hey, we aren't here for the Cambrian wildlife, we're here for the continents.
Section 1. Laurentia, the American ancestor.
So this ancestral continent, known as Laurentia, is the original stomping ground for modern-day Americans, Canadians, and Greenlanders. But it was absolutely nothing like modern North America. If you lived in Kansas or Texas back then, you were sitting on prime tropical real estate right there on the equator. Your east coast faced a massive ocean called the Iapetus, while the west coast looked out over an even bigger global ocean called the Panthalassa. There were no Rocky Mountains. The Appalachians were just underwater mud. And perhaps the most mind-bending part of the whole shebang? The entire landmass was magnetically upside down. What we call north today was actually facing south.
Section 2. Gondwana, the Southern Giant.
Now, for those of you tuning in from Brazil, South Africa, India, Australia, or Antarctica, we have a completely different story for you. You guys weren't on separate continents at all. You were all roommates on this massive, singular landmass called Gondwana. And Gondwana straddled the South Pole, but here's the kicker. There was absolutely zero ice. Forget about glaciers and penguins. It was so incredibly warm that shallow seas covered much of what would become Africa and Australia. The modern-day Sahara was a seabed, the Amazon was a bay, and Antarctica, it was a tropical archipelago located right near the equator. Just let that sink in for a second. The coldest, most unforgiving place on Earth today was once a balmy 68-degree beach resort.
And to really wrap your head around the sheer, mind-boggling scale of Gondwana, it's just hard to overstate. Clocking in at around 38 million square miles, it absolutely dwarfs our modern giants. I mean, if you take modern Russia, Canada, and the United States and mash all of their land masses together, Gondwana was still significantly bigger. It was the ultimate southern heavyweight of the ancient world.
Section 3. Baltica and Siberia, the Lonely Twins.
Okay, the history of the European continent, probably the strangest of all. Because 500 million years ago, Europe was completely split in half. Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and Western Russia sat on a tectonic plate called Baltica, which was drifting northward from roughly where modern South Africa is today. Meanwhile, Siberia, the other half of modern Russia, was an entirely separate island continent floating all the way over by the equator. So Russia was quite literally two different countries on two different continents, separated by thousands of kilometers of open ocean. Oh, and if you're wondering about Germany and Poland, they didn't even exist on the surface yet. They were totally underwater.
Section 4. Avalonia, the Forgotten Microcontinent.
Now, this brings us to Avalonia. This is a hidden tectonic player, a forgotten little piece of land, that happens to be the actual ancient homeland for millions of people living today in places like Boston, New York, Newfoundland, and southern England. 500 million years ago, this microcontinent was just this tiny, narrow strip of land, maybe only 500 miles wide. It was originally stuck like superglue to the northern edge of that massive Gondwana supercontinent, right about where modern Morocco sits today. But Avalonia, it wasn't going to stay there forever.
Over the course of about 200 million years, this tiny microcontinent literally breaks off from Gondwana and goes on this epic slow-motion road trip northward across the deep blue waters of the Iapetus Ocean, and eventually it violently crashes into both Laurentia and Baltica. This incredible multi-million-year collision course is the exact event that forged the foundations of modern Europe and North America together.
And the impact of Avalonia crashing into Laurentia was so violent, it stacked the Earth's crust up like a multi-car pileup on a highway. This colossal collision created the Scottish Highlands, the mountains of Norway, and the Appalachian Mountains. The rock was pushed up to create peaks around 26,000 feet high. Think about that. That is almost as high as the modern Himalayas, which means the eroded, flattened rock you might walk over in Boston today was once a towering Himalayan-sized mountain peak just baking under a Saharan sun.
Section 5. The Race to Pangaea. 500 million years, fast forward.
So, if we hit fast forward and put all these puzzle pieces together, you watch these seemingly separate landmasses rapidly slide, rotate, and just smash into one another as the great Iapetus Ocean closes completely, Baltica smashes into Laurentia, Siberia drifts east, and Avalonia wedges itself perfectly right in the middle. Finally, 335 million years ago, the whole thing locks together into the famous supercontinent everyone knows, Pangaea. But here's a detail often skipped in school. Pangaea wasn't the first supercontinent. It wasn't the start of the story, it was just the newest kid on the tectonic block. Before Pangaea, the Earth's landmasses had already grouped together and broken apart multiple times, forming much older supercontinents with names like Kenorland, Columbia, and Rodinia.
Section 6. The Twist. The map is moving.
All right, we've traced the incredible journey of how our modern continents were forged from the ancient Cambrian world. But here is the ultimate twist of this explainer, and it's going to completely change your perspective on modern geography. See, we teach kids in school about the 7 continents as if they're permanent fixtures, right? We treat them like these fixed, unmoving landmarks. But the truth is, the map is never finished. That world map you memorized in grade school is just a single, temporary screenshot in a feature-length film that has been running for billions of years. The continents never actually stopped moving. They just slowed down enough for us to pave highways on them and pretend they were always ours.
And this hidden motion, it's happening right beneath us today. Literally right now as we speak, the continent of Africa is slowly cracking open in the east along the East African Rift. And even more dramatically, the entire Atlantic Ocean is actually getting wider by about 1 inch every single year. Believe it or not, that is exactly the same rate that your fingernails grow. It's crazy. In 50 million years, the Atlantic Ocean will be almost 800 miles wider than it is right now.
Looking into our geological future, the changes get even wilder. Over in the southern hemisphere, Australia is absolutely sprinting north toward Asia at a staggering rate of almost 3 inches a year. Scientists project that this rapid movement is setting the stage for everything to just collide all over again. In about 250 million years, North America and Asia will merge up at the North Pole, creating a brand new supercontinent that researchers are already calling a Masha.
So, as we close out this explainer, I really want you to remember that the solid ground beneath your feet has lived 1,000 lives. It has been deep ocean floor, a towering mountain peak, a frozen wasteland, and a tropical jungle. It's traveled from the deep South Pole all the way up to the equator. So, drop your guess in the comments. When our future descendants, 1,000,000 generations from now, look back at a globe, what bizarre and beautiful new world do you think they'll see? Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.